I'm excited about this conversation because when I think about all that you've done, all that your organization's done, I bring it down to basically one word, and that's transformation. And I think that's what I'd like to speak a little bit about today.
Sure.
But before we jump into that, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell everybody in the audience just a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, my name is Lina Polimeni. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Consumer Eli Lilly and Company, and within that, I lead all of our consumer-face activities globally from a marketing perspective. So our master brand campaigns for Lilly, as well as our advertising campaigns for our medicines, which we are in France, so I can hardly even touch that because it's outside of the United States. There's very strict rules, so I will be speaking very generically. But also our partnerships, our talent brand partnerships, our sports marketing, and all of our media buy as well as sits within my team globally.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited for the conversation. So, you know, when we were coming on stage, they were talking about how Eli Lilly has really moved from traditional pharmaceutical to being a modern medicine company. And it's been really interesting to watch you put the discussion of health in the middle of cultural events.
Yeah.
And really put people at the center of what you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about that brand transformation and that road that you've been on?
Yeah, it has been a journey. We started this about 5 years ago, right before the Tokyo Olympics. And, you know, the initial brief was very, very simple, which was no one knows who Lilly is. And I thought they should. This was 5 years ago. Of course, now things have changed. And, you know, Lilly is a company that's been around for 150 years. And 150 years of being not only an independent company, but really the same company that Colonel Eli Lilly founded in Indiana 150 years ago. And I started Lilly 22 years ago. I started in sales, and, you know, as I progressed through the company, I've always wanted to do marketing. I just always saw such a passion and just like something different inside from the way people were approaching the medicine that was not what I was getting back, you know, outside. And, you know, so I always had this vision of we need to be able to tell the story of who we are and also put health at the forefront of everything we do, because no one inside of Lilly only talks about the medicine. They always talk about getting people healthy. And that was not how pharma was perceived. And so fast forward to the Tokyo Olympics, we had an opportunity to be sponsors at first for 1 year, and then, you know, we prolonged our sponsorship. But that opportunity kind of opened up my mind to two things. On one hand, I did want our athletes to be able to actually be sponsored by the medicine, not just generically about the disease. And that had never been done in pharma before or at the Olympics. And then at the same time, I felt we can't show up just as a product. We have to show up as a brand. And what kind of created like the perfect storm for all of that, then, you know, Tokyo got interrupted and canceled or postponed because of COVID. And when it came back, health was in the forefront of everyone's mind. But also, for me, I noticed it was the first time that I started seeing consumer preference when it came to pharma companies being formed in front of my very eyes.
Interesting.
Because people were asking, you know, whose vaccine are you getting? And, you know, so there was a question about, can I trust the company that's making the medicine that I take?
It was really a pivotal moment from
a
brand standpoint. Interesting.
And so I jumped in, and you know, we started this conversation. So we started just from a campaign, which was a medicine company during the Tokyo Olympics, and that's how we established who we are. But to answer your question about how we started the transformation, really, I had the team just taking a look and interview like 30 to 40 people inside of Lilly. So we started from ourselves, everyone from like the CEO, you know, to manufacturing scientists and everyone. And what came back is this insight that I find very true at Lilly, which is, you know, I think all pharma companies are patient-centric, of course. They put the patient at the center of everything. And that is also the business model. What's different about Lilly is that every single one of us, whether you are the CEO or the last person that closes the manufacturing line, we see a person on the other side of the prescription. And that became so evident in that first interviews. And so with that, we just kind of started asking ourselves, but why? You know, why? And, you know, are we just good people? Like, why do we do this? And it came down to the fact that all of us, from the scientists to the marketers to engineers, we have this appreciation for how precarious life is. and how precious life is. And so it turns out that our ability to make medicine to whatever capacity you have within the company is really the way each of us feels that's our impact to humanity. And so it created a really high purpose, which then fueled the transformation.
Yeah, you know what else I found interesting when I was doing research was the move from sickness to health.
Yes, yes.
And that's really critical as well
Yeah.
as you think about your brand, isn't it?
Yes, that was especially evident in our latest campaign, which was the 150th anniversary, which was medicine is not about sickness, medicine is about health. It's just interesting because when you, any other product, if you think about it, in good marketing, when you market a face cream, you don't say this is about the wrinkles. You say this is about you feeling youthful or
Right.
feeling beautiful.
Right.
And so on one hand, it was an obvious thing from me as a marketer. But on the other hand, the biggest piece was like, there's no one in the company that truly works for illness. They want, we just had our global leadership conference, and part of what, we were discussing is that, yes, we're making incredible advances. We have so much progress also in the future. Patients want a cure. They want.
That's right.
Nobody wants to feel a little better.
That's
People
right.
want solutions for their problems.
I was just going to say, it's really driving the solution, driving the positive
Yeah.
outcome for medicine is the health. And it's just interesting to see the way
Yeah.
you flipped it on its head.
And what that allows to is to partner with partners very differently when you have that type of positioning. None of this was manufactured. We didn't sit down and say, how do we do? It was really just translating what I was seeing internally. Yeah. And for example, one of our latest campaign with Caitlin Clark, this was such a moment for me because in 22 years, this was the first time that when consumers were writing back to us, I was getting emails, basically getting the brief back, which never happens to a marketer because I was getting these emails saying, I can't believe a medicine company would advertise not about the medicine, but about movement and because that's, medicine plays an important role in illness for sure, and in helping people become healthy, but it's one piece of the equation. It's not the whole equation. So having a platform about what really matters, which is health, allowed us to also create more meaningful partnerships.
Absolutely. So this is a big mind shift, right? It's a mindset shift across your organization. And if there are brand marketers here that are thinking about their own transformation, what are some of the things that they need to think about organizationally? Because I imagine it wasn't just as easy as you just went through and said. And maybe what are some of the gotchas?
It was not easy. Well, I would say there are a couple of things. One is it has to start with conviction. It really does. Like none of this works if you just decide you want to do a brand refresh. You can do a brand refresh. It's not the same as a brand transformation. And so just know that it has to start with conviction. It has to be something you truly believe that. And I know it sounds obvious, but it's not. It's not as obvious. So, for me, it wasn't just something I believed in. I really can say that's what the company is truly, truly about. It's about making people healthy. That's why people work at Lilly since the beginning of Lilly. And so you have to have that conviction. You have to find your brand truth. I think the most important things when you transform is that when you find your brand truth, not to just use it as a guide of what to say, but the most important thing is that it will tell you what you will not do, what you will not stand for, what you will never say. And I think that's what distinguished good transformations for just brand refreshes.
It's almost as important to agree on what is not true and what you will not say as it is that what you will and what you do stand for.
Exactly.
Right?
And that requires so much clarity. It requires somebody that's willing to be very wrong, very publicly. But if you believe it, eventually it's, I think you're going to start bringing people along and transform that. And then, of course, I have an incredible team that's been with me from the very beginning of this, and they have a lot of resilience and a lot of grit. And so you have to be able to also understand what's your role as a leader, which is to, describe current state and future state and help people understand that the future state is possible, but also rely on the skill set of your teams.
Absolutely. And, you said a word that I think is so critical, resilience. Because you're going to get pushback whenever you are trying, whether you are transforming a brand, you're transforming technology, whatever it is you're transforming, there's going to be pushback.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's like, how many times do you sit there and I'm in conversations where I'm like, maybe it's me, maybe I'm pushing too hard, maybe I'm not looking at this right.
Yeah.
But it's the resilience and the resilience of your team that really makes it happen.
It is the resilience of your team. And then when you're leading a team, it's a tricky balance because you're like, am I pushing too much? Am I, yes, they're resilient, but am I driving them to the ground? And, one time I was working, one of my favorite directors is Jan Demage that I work with. And one of the things in one of this conversation he told me was, when I was talking just about that, he was just like, you need the friction because you can't make a spark without a friction. And that really stayed with me. So sometimes when I get that feeling of like, am I making this a little bit too hard? It just, I know there may be a spark. I'm trying to spark something. And so you need the friction to make a spark.
I love that. So you mentioned Caitlin Clark, and you got Lilly has really shown up powerfully in the market lately. And you talked about Caitlin, Super Bowl partnerships, Team USA. Talk to us a little bit. It's a two-part question, but how do you look at choosing your partners? And then how does data and insights help drive who it is that you're partnering with and what that looks like?
Yes, so it starts again, all starts from our brand truth and our conviction. So our brand truth is health above all, and that's what we stand for. So when we look for partners, whether they're athletes or brand partners or entertainment, I always look at three things. One is, will we improve health together? If there isn't a shared desire to improve health, then there's no point in us partnering. It becomes a logo slap, which has a place. You can have a lot of reach, but to me, reach without meaning is just a logo with a very big budget, and I'm not interested. So will we improve health together is the number one criteria. The second criteria is, can we use Lilly's unique expertise to do so? So sometimes there's a scientific expertise, sometimes it's marketing expertise, but can we lend something to this as a company? And the third piece is, can we help our partner achieve something that's important for them in the process? Because it is incredibly important for me that when people walk away from a partnership, even when they decide not to partner with us, actually, that the experience is very good and that it is, like a positive interaction with the brand. And so, for example, when we partner with athletes or with celebrities, it's always about not only, improving health, but also can I, from a meaningful perspective, not just, without any meaning, help them as well. And like one example is Caitlin Clark, because we have this long-term partnership with her, but within that partnership, we're also helping her foundation, not just grow as a foundation, but for example, together we have created multi-sports courts in Indianapolis and other cities that she then donates to the city where kids can go play basketball. So it's a way to help her and her foundation, and at the same time continue health.
Absolutely, and it's got the ripple effect, right?
Yes.
So then health and the positive attitude or the positive message then rolls down. So I know we can't talk about products very often, but again, thinking about the shift and the transformation that Lilly's been going through, another big milestone for you has been Lilly Direct, where you have now created direct consumer, direct relationships with individuals. And that's a really interesting change and dynamic for your organization. Can you, again, without going into too much detail, can you tell us a little bit about that and maybe share the impact that it's had?
There's about a third of Americans that never fill their prescriptions when they need something, any prescription.
Wait, 1/3 of Americans?
Yes, yeah. That, they get prescribed something and never fill it. And that's for a variety of reasons. Most of it is either a cost or more than cost itself is like the surprise of not knowing. So you get a solution at the doctor's and then you go to the pharmacy. And, there's also, I think, this, I don't want to say misconception, but certainly this like misplaced understanding of where that happens in the ecosystem. So it's not necessarily the manufacturer that does that. There's so many interactions with, the ecosystem, the healthcare insurance and so forth. But either way, from a consumer perspective and a patient perspective, people end up not having medicine. And so Lilly Direct is one way in which ourselves as a company can kind of cut through that ecosystem to some degree and just go directly to patients.
Cut through the noise and get
cut through the noise.
Direct, yeah.
And it is not, it's about at least give transparency. So people know that when they go on the website and they see a price, that's the price. And then of course, if you have insurance, it may play a little bit different and you may end up paying less. But the bottom of the idea is exactly what you said, which is really, again, putting people at the center and figuring out how do we make this a little bit easier for them.
It's so interesting because it's about transparency.
Yes.
Right? It's transparency and ease for the patient, for the consumer, for individuals. So as you think about all of these kind of there are tectonic shifts happening within marketing right now. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about technology, if I didn't talk about everything that's happening with AI. How are you thinking about it, both in terms of how it better powers you and your organization, but then also how is it improving potentially health outcomes,
yes,
as an example?
I would say a couple of things. First and foremost, of course, in a medicine company, the biggest impact AI can have is on the medicine making. So not a science. I can play one on TV, but I'm not a scientist. But I would say, obviously we have invested, as publicly is known, we have invested with NVIDIA in our supercomputer. So there's a lot of innovation that's coming from AI that goes to basically shorten the time that it takes to make a medicine, but also shorten, and this is where I'm talking outside of my area, but shorten, the models that we can make in terms of like, will genes work with certain other antibodies? Or maybe I shouldn't try to speak like I know science, but modeling things that before had human modeling behind them and now can be done a lot faster, so we can go through hypotheses a lot faster, and that ultimately gets us to solutions for patients faster. On the marketing, so I think that's the biggest use for AI.
Absolutely. Yep.
I would be silly to be here and say the biggest use for AI in a pharma company is with marketing. In my world, I think there's a couple of things. One is, your consumer journey is obviously the most important thing that you can understand, and that can help you influence both the experience that people have as well as the outcome that you have with your products. AI lives in that journey already. So for a marketer to not understand how, I think that's the most important thing. Like, instead of just thinking, how can I use AI, is thinking through, where is AI talking to my consumers and how can I use that as a way to accelerate, remove friction.
And how is it changing their experiences and how they are interacting with your brand,
exactly.
I imagine.
And how to make that easier, more delightful. I think that's the question we should be asking. From a creative perspective, to me, it's interesting because as a CMO, I am so bored by the question I get all the time, which is, how do you do the same thing with less? Now we have AI, which is, of course, we can do less. But when you sit where you can create campaigns, you can have, like in a creative space, to me, the question should be, how can we do so much more than like, when calculators were invented, math got harder, not easier. So like, why are we trying to do easier things? And so that's the things I always try to push. I think sometimes in marketing specifically, AI is used like a business card. People come to you and like, you should work with us. We're like, have this AI power, da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, yeah, but what can we do more? Not less. What can we do more of?
I love the idea of doing more, and it's almost like the opportunities, because I don't want to say they're endless, but we're unlocking so much more.
Yeah.
Do you find, I'm curious to know how you're mobilizing your own team to adopt AI, because I also find there's in marketing, there's a tremendous amount of excitement. I agree with you. Every vendor is now like powering AI marketing, right?
What does that mean?
And then, so there's also a little bit of fear around, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my role? And I look at it as, this makes me way more powerful and there's way more opportunity coming. How do you kind of work with your team to make sure they're comfortable with the changes and also are knowledgeable with?
Yes. I love this question because, on one hand, I would say Lilly is an exception to this, I think, because the leadership team, very senior leadership team, we have embraced AI very, very early and very, very transparently. So we went in 1 year, at this time of the year, last year, we had 12 active users of AI that we have, platforms that we have within the company, to this year is 41,000 users that are registered through the company and they use it every single day. So the adoption has been super fast, and it has been driven by leadership. I feel like at the beginning there was a little bit of, I want to do this deck with AI, but I shouldn't say I use AI, versus we've been the opposite. It's almost like, why don't you use AI to, like, I can't wait for a week anymore for a deck. So that's on one hand. The way I really talk to my team about this, and in general, is when I look, we're very, very fortunate. When I look at our pipeline, this is public information. There's so many launches that are coming, hopefully, our way, that what a marketer should think through is, how do you get through the marketing cycle faster? How do you learn for yourself to become indispensable, because you know the core capabilities? You know how to launch a product. You know how to read the market. You know how to look around the corner. That's, and you know how now to use AI to read and look beyond more corners than you were before. But the ability to, at the end of the day, the ability to launch a product, the ability to create adherence, the ability, that is something that, create that capability. I tell my team, even though we're all marketers, is you have to raise little GMs, general managers, that know how to run a business. Marketing is the way you do that. And then, of course, if you have AI, you can do that faster, but it doesn't mean a substitution.
Agreed.
Because you have become a little manager of the business.
Agree. I love that narrative. So doing a transformation that you guys have kind of undergone really does require, I want to say, personal bravery. We were talking about how difficult it is, and a big willingness to challenge the status quo of what is normal, not just for your own brand, but for your industry.
Yes.
Right? How, when you think about the next generation of leaders, the people on your team and the people that might be here, or the people that are, how would you kind of tell them to be bold? I know that coaching is, you're kind of passionate about that as well, but how do you help them embody that boldness to be able to take these chances and to put yourself out there like this?
One thing I found is you have to create a space for it, first and foremost. One of the biggest epiphany for me has been, I used to think that leadership is about conviction, and it is, like, my own leadership is about being sure and convicted and kind of bring people along. But then what I found out is that the biggest thing that does, it actually allows people to find what they have conviction about, and then they found their own way to lead. And I think if you lead as, this is what we're supposed to do, and you implement and you execute, it's okay, and you get fine work. But if you are not afraid to show your conviction, and your team sees you go through, like, how hard it is, and you're able to say, okay, we may not be able to get to exactly where we wanted to now, we're going to take a detour, but the North Star hasn't changed. Then what I saw is that it creates, people start to find their own intuition, people start to find their own conviction, and they feel validated in expressing that. And so I think that's, to me, one of the best way to foster that is to, helping people find their own voice, and then being their biggest advocate for that.
I love that you keep saying conviction, and what I'm interpreting from that is not just conviction and belief, but also a passion.
Yes.
For what it is. I mean, come on, she's Italian. She's from Rome. So they are nothing if not passionate.
I took that out because passion, I used to get the feedback, like, most of my career, end of the year, just like, you're too passionate. And I didn't know what that meant. Like, I didn't. So anyways, that's why I don't say passionate.
Non è vero.
Non è vero.
Non è vero. No, you can never be too passionate. I don't believe in that. How do you kind of get people to buy into the passion and the belief that you have, because you're really driving this change? That's,
I think it goes down, just like I said, the brand truth. Once you have it, you know what to say no to.
Yeah.
It is similar. I'm not saying that my passion or my conviction is the right one. It is what I believe in. And so I can't really have wavering around that. And so if you are not convinced about that, that is fine. That's totally fine. And there are great places where, perhaps you're convinced on, we are a company of 53,000 people. Not everybody's going to believe this. But what I found is when you build a team, and when you get people that have to help you drive, they have to be bought into the mission, and they have to be bought in. So, and I think for me, it's always been never taking it too personally. So on one hand, very passionate. So obviously it feels personal. But if you come to me and you say, I think we should just, which has been said, this is unnecessary risk. Why would we do this? It's okay.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't, kind of belong into this conversation. Yeah. But I don't hold it against anyone because there's other great places where, other pushes can work. But you have to kind of curate a team that believes in the same things. And also you have to look at results and be honest and be willing to revisit things that may not have worked. And I always find being transparent and being honest with both the highs and the lows, that goes a long way.
I love the combination of kind of the passion and belief with then the ability to have the data, the insights to help you make the right decisions as you're on that journey, which I think is a very powerful combination. So we are wrapping up here, but I always, whenever I do a fireside chat, I always ask one question, which is, we have a lot of folks in the room here. We've kind of talked a lot about the transformation of Lilly. If you were to boil it down, what would be 2 or 3 things that you would want this group to walk away with from our conversation today?
I think transformations and great brand transformation really stems from the very most basic fundamentals of marketing, which is you have to know your audience, you have to understand the ecosystem in which they operate, and then you have to know what's unique about your brand. And once you find that, I think the thing to walk away with is interrogate yourself. Do you know your brand truth? Can you say your brand truth to anyone? And when you say that, is it self-explanatory? Do people get it? Can you stand behind it? Does it tell you what you will not accept and what you will not do? If you have those components, and then you can get yourself a team that believes in that and you can build across that, that's really the things that I think, to me, transform. Because what happens is, and it happened to us for certain, is you do this, massive transformation, and then it's never done, because then people start copying the playbook, and I think that's another misconception. That's a good thing, because then you're moving the category, and then you have to start thinking, where do I take this brand next? Which means, where do I take the category next? And if you don't have those fundamentals of knowing your brand truth and knowing what you will not be standing for, then you can't continue to transform.
Love it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Give it up one more time for Lina Polimeni. And thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful day.